Are things getting harder for retirees? I've been a financial advisor for 20 years, so I've had a front seat to this show. And unfortunately, yes, things are getting harder for retirees. And let me share with you why. You know, back in our grandparents' day, back in our parents' age, there were really three legs to the retirement stool for financial security. There was Social Security, which we still have, but unfortunately, many of us now, our Social Security is going to be taxed. And back in my grandfather's day, my father's day, many people could still count on a pension from their company. And unless you work for the government now, or a municipality or a university, pensions are a thing of the past. So we've lost a really important pillar for our retirement. And then the third piece of that is our savings. So where we used to have three legs to the retirement stool, Social Security, a pension from a company, plus our savings, you know, we've lost one of those off the bat. So now we have two legs, but one of those legs is going to be taxed as ordinary income for many of us, right? Up to 85% of our Social Security can be taxed. So for the first 50 years of the Social Security program, Social Security was not taxed because in many ways that's just a return of the money that we've put into the system. But then in 1983, Congress passed, and in 1984, then President Clinton passed into law that up to 50%, 50% of our Social Security could be taxed. And then about 10 years later, Reagan signed into law that actually up to 85% of our Social Security could be taxed. So that's one thing that's making it harder. And then the savings, right? In my parents' age and your parents' age, many people could save 10% and it would be fine, right? That's how I was raised. That's what my parents told me. Save 10% for when you retire and you're fine. And in their day, that was true. But in today's day, that's not true because of the reasons we just talked about. And unfortunately, life has gotten more expensive. When I graduated high school, if you put 100% of your salary towards your house, you could buy a house for 3 times the median income in the United States. So the median house costs 3 times the median salary in the United States. And unfortunately, that number is now almost 6. So that's gone up. And you look at what our major expenses are in life, right? Our housing is obviously a major expense. Another major expense is our cars. And our cars are not just cars anymore, they're computers. The average new car costs $50,000. The average car payment right now for a new car is almost $750. And almost 20% of new car payments are $1,000 a month or more. So we have all of these other financial issues, financial challenges that we're facing at a time where pensions have gone away and now Social Security is taxable. So from a financial standpoint, is retiring harder today? Is it harder to be a retiree today? I think so. And those are just for the income side, but let's look at the expense side of things, right? We talked about cars, that's on the expense side, but it's getting more expensive to get our homes maintained. You know, the local handyman down the street really has now become a corporate job, and it's become more expensive, and it's more expensive to keep our house maintained. Property taxes are more expensive because for most of us, property taxes based on the value, the current value of your home. If you live in California, you're probably covered by Prop 13, but for the rest of us, we're not covered by something like that. And as the value of our home goes up, guess what? Our property tax goes up. And in many states, it's getting much more expensive to insure our home, right? So the property insurance, our homeowner's insurance, has gone up to the point where in Florida, the insurer of choice, the insurer of the majority of new policies, is actually the state-run insurance policy, which is supposed to be insurance of last result. But because of the increased storms and Natural disasters, a lot of insurance companies are pulling out. It's just not profitable enough for them. So from a financial standpoint, things are getting harder. And then also from a social standpoint, right? Life is very different now than it was 20 years ago. We're all online so much that developing good, deep friendships outside of work is becoming harder. And when we leave work, as much as we'd like to think that we're going to stay friends with our friends at work, the reality, I don't like being the bearer of bad news, but the reality is for most retirees, the vast majority of retirees, you're going to lose your friends from work. And the reason is you no longer share proximity with them, right? Your desk is not next to their desk anymore. You don't share a common mission. And you probably, if you were lucky, maybe you had a common enemy, right? The person in the office that both you and your friend didn't like. So we lose those things. So as good as our intentions might be, we're likely going to lose our work friends. So it's more important now than ever to build up that base of friends. So that's another reason that retirement, I think, is harder now than it was 20 years ago. And we've also, before we retired, I don't think we're as prepared from a non-financial standpoint to retire as people 20 years ago were. Because, the workplace is, I think, much more stressful today than it was 20 years ago, right? We've had 2 decades of better, faster, cheaper, which means all of us have had to step up our game, step up our productivity at work. And we don't have as much time for passions outside of work. So because we don't have the time for passions outside of work, that's another hurdle that we have to overcome in retirement. And having been a financial advisor for over 20 years, I can share with you just about everybody has to go through what I call the 4 phases of retirement. And the first phase is a fun one. The first phase is vacation, right? It feels like vacation. And for most people, that vacation feeling lasts 3 months to at most 6 months. But if you can make it last longer, that's great. And then the next phase is a phase of loss, of feeling regret because you've given up a part of your life. And just know that most people go through this. It's normal. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't retire. It doesn't mean you shouldn't consider retiring early. But just know that there is this phase of loss where you're going to feel that feeling of loss and absence in your life. And then the third phase is when you move on from loss and say, okay, I recognize that. And now you're iterating, trying to find your new purpose and trying to build your new network of friends and your new passions and your new relationships. And so that's what I call the iterating process. Some people get lucky and they find their new passion and they find their new tribe of friends quickly. And others of us are going to have to try 3, 4, 5 different things until we find out what our new passion is. And then the next phase is you fully transitioned. And the next phase is where you have re-emerged as who you're going to be in retirement. And the good news is, I would say 70, 80% of folks, maybe even more than that, look back and say, there's no way I would want to go back to working, right? So that transition, those 4 phases, we all have to go through that at some point. And I think retirement is harder now just because we've been working so hard at work that we don't have the time to go through some of these phases before we retire, right? We are sprinting all the way to the finish line. Okay, the next one is health. This is a big one. There's lots of ways to make more money. At our age, once we lose our health, it's very difficult to gain it back. And people think, let's say you're in your early 50s or late 40s, and you think, well, I'm healthy now. I'm going to be healthy until I'm 80. And I hope that's the case. The reality is for the average 60-year-old, they have 1,000 weeks of healthy, active time remaining. that's not a lot of time. So you want to be on it. You want to be ready to enjoy the youth of your senior years. And unfortunately, the healthy lifespan in the United States is quite a bit lower than what people think. Most people think the healthy lifespan, the amount of how old you are when you lose your health or have a major health issue come up, most people would say, oh, that's probably going to be about 75, somewhere between 70 and 80, probably 75 and 80 is what most people are going to say. And if you were in Japan or Korea or Norway, yes, their healthy lifespan is 72, 73 years old, so pretty close to that 75. But here in the US, our healthy lifespan is 60, just a little bit over 66 years, 66.1 years. And this is according to data by the World Health Organization, which is why it's so important that all of us are thoughtful and deliberate about when we retire and if we want to retire early. And that's why I made this video up here, 5 reasons to retire as soon as you can. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in there. Bye-bye.